Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, I don't know where to start today. There are so many things out there vying for our attention. Let me just give you a quick little rundown. We got Jasmine Crockett out there trying to, well, I guess through racism, justify illegal immigration. We've got the media trying to conceal the fact that the man deported from Maryland is not just a Maryland man and a father. He's actually someone who is part of Tren de Aragua and had been determined as such back many, many years ago, long before Trump. We've got the Supreme Court decision that allows Trump to continue to use the Alien Act of 1798 to deport these members of Tren de Aragua. We've got a bunch of stuff vying for our attention. We've got Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's announced his run for Senate against John Cornyn in Texas. We've got a bunch of stuff, my friends. We've got the tariffs. We'll get to as much of this as we can, my friends, in due course here. Before we get started, if you are in sales, let me ask you this. Are you where you want to be? Chances are good the answer to that is no. Chances are good that it's no. Whether you're struggling for sales or whether you just want to sharpen your skills and get even better at the sales process, Matt Easton and Easton University are here to help you do just that. And they have a training program. Listen, I've been around sales, in sales for a long time. Started in 2001, actually, a couple of weeks before 9/11. And I've studied from some of the best in the business, starting with the late, great Zig Ziglar. And I would put Matt Easton in the category who's as good at this as anybody. His system is great. He has a way to get you on track. It's not a cookie cutter system. In fact, they've got 2 weekly sales coaching calls that you can jump on as well. If you follow the system, it will pay off, but you got to take the first step. That first step, go to toddhuffshow.com/Easton, EASTON, and become a student of Easton University, whether for yourself or for your sales team. You can take one of the classes or you can become a member of the full onboard, all the training. Check it out, toddhuffshow.com/Easton. Do not let this opportunity slip by you, my friends. Invest in yourself. It will absolutely pay off. All right, so let us now decide where we're going to start. I think we're going to start by talking about what's happening with the recent Supreme Court case, the hearing. And in short, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump is within his powers under the law, under the Constitution, to deport these foreign terrorists, these members of Tren de Aragua, to deport them from the United States of America under the old 1798 Alien Enemies Act. Stephen Miller tweeted this out on Monday after the ruling. Alien Enemies Act now in full effect. The foreign terrorists will be arrested and expelled. And so this is precisely, listen, you hear the left say that Trump is abusing presidential power. Trump is stepping outside the lines of the Constitution, of the law. This is proof that he's not. Now, listen, you can disagree with the ruling. In fact, some of the Supreme Court justices did disagree with that ruling. It was not a unanimous ruling. It was a 5-4 vote. So you can have a different opinion on this. And of course, the talking points, the position that the left takes is that, well, the court is full of conservatives. a word about that real quick. All I want, and dare I say all that conservatives want on the court, are people, justices who interpret the law and the Constitution and apply it as originally intended, right? You could say I'm an originalist. I'm someone who reveres the words of the Constitution and the law. I believe that is precisely what these justices should be doing. They should be deciding what the law was trying to accomplish, why the words were written the way that they were, as best as they can, while at the same time following what those words say. You can't just make something up out of whole cloth, but you try to look at what they were trying to accomplish, look at the text of the law, look at it against the Constitution, look at the text of the Constitution, look at the what the founders were trying to accomplish with that wonderful founding document that we have, and then to make a ruling based upon that. I'm old enough to remember, I think it was Stephen Breyer, one of the former members of the U.S. Supreme Court, appointed by, I want to say, was it Clinton? I think it was Clinton, but I'm not sure. He's a leftist appointee, a Democrat appointee. He's been out there in the past saying that you can cite foreign law in your court decisions, which is preposterous. But the point here, I remember saying on this program in the past when I was talking about that, we're just a half step away of being able to cite a Harry Potter novel, which some people do. And that's the thing about the court, is that it draws its legitimacy from being able to articulate and to demonstrate how it has applied the law in a particular case. That's why, ironically, in spite of what the left will have you believe, the Supreme Court actually did more damage to itself in the Roe versus Wade decision when they first made that decision, because they just made up a bunch of stuff from the bench. As I've said before, it was 9 old white guys deciding to tell women what to do with their bodies, making up this whole thing about trimesters and all this stuff. Fetus, the fetus, which of course is Latin for small child, and they have determined things like viability and all that stuff came from the Supreme Court in whole cloth. That's the job of Congress. The court is to take the laws that Congress passed, to take the Constitution, to look at the case at hand and say, based upon everything happening here, all these factors, what is the law? Does the law reflect, the Constitution? Does the law violate the Constitution? Maybe we've never been asked this question before. We're asked to reconcile a particular law against the Constitution, something in Article 3, right? You go through and you look at executive power and you say, well, this is a case where that law doesn't compute with the court's understanding of the Constitution. These are the sorts of things that should happen in a Supreme Court hearing, a Supreme Court case, not just the making up. It's not just the public opinion. It's not, it doesn't matter if they don't represent anybody. They represent, if anything, the law and the Constitution. That is who the Supreme Court represents. It is the voice, if you will, for the Constitution and for federal law. Shouldn't be for international law, as Stephen Breyer suggested. So the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution and the law allow for the president to make this determination. And so now they're off and running with this. In fact, let's listen to what Stephen Miller said. He was on with Sean Hannity the night of the ruling, explaining what this meant, what this president is going to do, explaining just the whole situation and why what's being done is being done. Here he is on, I believe it's on Hannity. Here he is. Oh, hold on. Now, what happened there? Let me refresh that because I don't have my audio for that. Let's do that again. So, let's try this again. Stephen Miller, on with Hannity, talking about this decision. Try number 2. Let's see if it goes. And it's not going. Why is that not going? All right, I'm going to have to deal with that on its own. That is not the way that that's supposed to work. But basically, Miller makes the case that, hey, this is the Supreme Court doing what it should be doing. This is within the power of the executive branch. This is something that the president has decided he's going to do, something that the law empowers him to do. The Supreme Court is trying to do its job. Meanwhile, we have other judges who are doing their darndest. Judge Boasberg, for example, who's trying to get some of these folks back into the country who are members of a violent gang called Tren de Aragua. They have been sent here from Venezuela. These are not good people. They have terrible intentions. They have wreaked havoc on the American people. And this is completely 100% justifiable. The court has ruled in Trump's favor here. So all the claims that Trump is acting outside the scope of the Constitution or making up the law or whatever, the court says not the case. The court also didn't directly say this, but by ruling he's within his rights to enforce a law that's been on the books since 1798, it should remind all of the people on the left that it doesn't matter the age of a law. It matters whether the law is on the books, whether it was passed by Congress and signed by the President of the United States. By the way, that law was signed into law by our second President of the United States, John Adams. I have to say that because after listening to some of these man on the street interviews, some people think our second President of the United States was, who knows, Michelle Obama, who knows? I mean, they think this country was founded in 1965, so who knows? But that was the second president, signed into law 1798, gives the president, the Supreme Court says, the ability to enforce this law by declaring Tren de Aragua this enemy, effectively. And they are going to be deporting those who are members of this gang, 14 years of age or older, out of this country. This is a victory for common sense. This is victory for the rule of law. This is victory. Listen, the Constitution seeks to put limits on the power of, candidly, all the branches of government. It limits it or it defines it. So the law allows the president, it doesn't mean the president doesn't have any force. The president doesn't have any authority. The president absolutely has authority. He has power. He has discretion to do things outlined and given to him through the Constitution and through statute. And that's precisely what he is doing. Now, the media is trying its level best to make sure that people don't really understand what's going on here. So there's another article here in the stack of stuff as I am scrolling through. This is at newsbusters.org. Newsbusters.org study, CNN, MSNBC refer to El Salvadoran illegal alien as Maryland man 120 times. 120 times he is referred to, this member. Actually, let me read this article to you. Let me read this article to you because we're talking about an individual who was deported along with these other members of Tren de Aragua. I want to read this to you, part of it anyway. And then I want to play, if my audio works here for my clips. I'll have to check that during the break if it's not working here again. But that's what I want to do. So this article, again, posted at newsbusters.org. It is on the stack of stuff on our website. If you got all of your news, it says, from CNN and MSNBC, you'd have a higher than 50-50 chance of believing the Trump administration had accidentally arrested and deported a naturalized American citizen living in Maryland and for no particular reason. He's right about this. The media loves to conflate, confuse, confound, and to cause panic amongst people when Republicans are in power, particularly Trump. In fact, the more that the Republican in power, in legitimate power, political power, the more that they are acting in alignment with conservative principles, constitutional principles, with principles that the Republican Party find to be priorities for this nation, the more the opposition comes out and tries to deceive as to what is really going on, which that leads to something else I want to get to today, Medicaid. According to one of the members of Doge, there are 1.3 million illegal aliens that are getting Medicaid. I'll share that later in the program as things come together here. But back to this issue at hand, the article continues and says cable networks, CNN and MSNBC, have hopelessly twisted the story of an El Salvadoran illegal alien. Note that word, that phrase, illegal alien, who recently was deported by the Trump administration. Over the past week, these two networks have referred to Kilmar Abrego Garcia as, quote, a Maryland man or a, quote, Maryland father, a whopping 120 times, while identifying him as an illegal alien only 7 times. Now, notice how this works. This is emotional manipulation. Notice, for example, when someone is arrested for being in this country illegally and they are going through the deportation process or whatever. Something happens to where an individual who's entered this country illegally is going through the process that could include deportation. Suddenly we hear about the separation of families, as though that's the intent of the law. See, the problem is when you're doing something illegal and you are caught for doing it, you have to go through the process, and that means that you're detained. Now, what happens is a lot of folks are coming in with children, and so the children are either forced to go to an adult facility where bad things can happen, or they can be put in a facility just for children. So the adult goes to the adult facility, the children go to the children's facility, and so that's separating them. And so it makes it sound like it's an intentional way of breaking up this family who's, not trying to do anything wrong, just trying to survive. Listen, I have been on record. I understand why people want to come to this country. I don't fault people for wanting to come to this country. I fault people for doing it the wrong way. They are wrong by doing that. There's no debate on this. They are wrong if you don't follow the laws and processes. You are in the wrong. Don't try to make it sound like I'm trying to punish the families. There's a process, by the way, that's completely understandable and justifiable when you understand what we're trying to do, which is protect the kids while also making sure that the process is handled in the appropriate way. Right? If you're going through the process of potential deportation and so forth, they're not trying to separate them to inflict emotional harm or trauma. Remember what's happened, by the way. These folks have traveled, in some cases, from South America all the way through Central America to cross our southern border. It's a dangerous thing. Trafficking, drugs, it is dangerous. The idea that the most dangerous time is when they get detained by American Border Patrol agents is just simply doesn't compute at all for me. There are horror stories of people being raped and abused and everything else on that long trek. And listen, I understand why people want to make that trek. What's interesting to me is that if the America that the left tells us about, complains about each and every day, is the real America, I don't understand why a single person would want to come to that nation. If you listen to the way that the left portrays this great nation, we would have a problem of people trying to get out of the country, American citizens fleeing the country, if it was half as bad as what these knuckleheads and clowns try to tell us it is. The problem is it's not that for the left. Their narrative makes no sense, but again, it gets no scrutiny either, especially by the media, because we get stuck on this sort of thing, separation of families at the border. And so it creates this emotional thing. But the truth is, if you're arrested as a parent for doing drugs and you're an American citizen, you get separated from your family. If you take your pick, if you set fire to a Tesla dealership and someone decides to enforce the law, you could be arrested and separated from your family. I mean, any number of things where you break the law, you could be separated from your family, but that's not how it is portrayed in the media. That's not how it's discussed in the media, so it loses its emotional edge. So this individual, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is a Maryland man, says MSNBC and CNN, or a Maryland father even. He's not an illegal alien because 120 times he was referred to as Maryland Man or Maryland Fowler, 7 times referred to as an illegal alien. But back to the article here. Meanwhile, MSNBC alone aired 11 objectively, false assertions that Garcia was actually a legal resident. So not only are they trying to make it sound like he's just this regular guy who's been targeted inexcusably by our government to be deported. He's just a Maryland man, a Maryland father. He's actually an illegal alien, number one. Number two, MSNBC, according to Newsbusters here, said 11 times they objectively asserted falsely that Garcia was a legal resident. He is not. MRC analysts, the article says, looked at all coverage of Kilmar Abrego Garcia's deportation to El Salvador on CNN and MSNBC, and from April 1st through April 6th. During that time, the networks aired a combined 72 stories about Garcia, 40 on MSNBC, 32 on CNN. CNN referred to Garcia using terms such as Maryland Man and Maryland Father 51 times across the 32 news stories about him last week. Only a single segment contained any mention he was in the country illegally. And just 13 of these stories even bothered to mention he was from El Salvador, not America. Can you see how that would skew public opinion? Can you see why people like me, and of course the vast majority of you, have problems with the media? This is deceptive. They are leaving these important factoids out for obvious purposes. And I'm getting to the end of the first segment here, friends. I'm going to take a break. Let me remind you before I hit that first break that we are starting the Inner Circle. It's a membership program here at the Todd Huff Show. You can become a member for life. $99 one-time investment. You'll be part of the founding members of the Inner Circle. This is something we've been planning and hoping to do for a long time. There's going to be exclusive content, exclusive things that we're going to do behind the scenes. There'll be some video chats, some discussions. The point of this is to help us become better conservatives, better communicators, have a better understanding, better in the actions that we're involved with, to coordinate and to plan. I guess you could say we're a bunch of community organizers behind the scenes here. But the program is designed to help us get better as a conservative movement, not bitter. Looking for a small group to start that here later this spring. Lifetime membership, just $99. If you're interested, text the word JOIN to 317-210-2830. Again, text the word JOIN to 317-210-2830. Or if you prefer, ToddHuffShow.com/join. Again, that's ToddHuffShow.com/join. Quick timeout, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So, a little bit, I figured out what my problem was. I changed a setting here on my computer that I play the sound bites through today. Changed the setting recently, and because I was trying to turn off, some of these sites have video that plays automatically, and I'm trying to get the sound off of that to get that to stop. And I accidentally, inadvertently turned off the ability from any of these sites to play audio with their video. So I had to make that adjustment, and so that's what the problem was, my friends. User error here at the Todd Huff Show. It happens. It happens even here. It's a remarkable thing. Friends, before we get into this conversation, continue where we left off, let me remind you, MyPillow has placed an allotment of bed sheets that were earmarked for the box stores. I've shared this with you. The box stores were arranged to have this order. They apparently backed out. It fell through. Effectively, MyPillow has a huge allotment of bed sheets. Of course, those sheets are going quickly because they're offering you this special deal to get these bed sheets. So, because the bed sheets, they were planning to sell them to someone at wholesale price, they're going to pass that along to you, basically. That means big savings on their world-famous Giza Dreams sheets and their Percale bed sheets. These things are dramatically discounted. You can check it out, mypillow.com. Use promo code Todd, and you will get those special pricing, that special pricing, wholesale pricing, my friends. Free shipping options are available. You have to check out the site for what those are. This allotment is not going to last long. When the sheets are gone, the deal is over. mypillow.com, promo code Todd, my first name. That'll get you the special pricing, and it'll get you discounts on other items. Or if you prefer, I know some of you prefer to make a phone call, you can do that as well. That phone number, 800-615-2015. I'll say it again, 800-615-2015. Just tell them promo code Todd, you'll get that special pricing. All right, so going through this analysis, newsbusters.org, how the media specifically at CNN and MSNBC, the propaganda arm for the Democrat Party, minimally, they are the PR firm for the Democrat Party. They have been trying to convince their viewers, their dwindling and shrinking number of viewers, that the individual deported, this Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is a Maryland man and a Maryland father, just unnecessarily targeted by the Trump administration because Trump hates people. Trump is just a xenophobe, a racist, all those things. And so that's why apparently, ostensibly, Trump has done this. They want you to think of this guy as a father, as a Maryland man just trying to live his life. But there's a lot more to this story, as you might imagine. MRC analysts looked at the coverage. But I think I read that. Okay, here we go. Garcia has had an outstanding order of removal since 2019. So the media, MSNBC, predominantly referring to him as a Maryland man, as a Maryland father, only referring to the fact that he's an illegal alien a couple of times, a tiny percentage of the time. But he is an illegal alien, and he's had an outstanding order. Are you listening to what I'm saying? An outstanding order of removal since 2019. That has been 5 to 6 years, depending when exactly in 2019, that he has been ordered to be removed. Now, there's more to the story, so hang on. However, because of his supposed fear of persecution by gang members in his home country, an immigration court granted him a withholding of removal to El Salvador. It's important to note, Newsbusters says here, that a withholding of removal does not confer legal residency. So when you hear people, if you've heard people in the media say that this individual was a U.S. citizen, that he has legal status, those are demonstrably and factually false. Rather, the article says, it merely means that the individual in question is temporarily exempt from being removed to the one specific country for which he was granted the withholding. So he never mentioned this. I believe he came into the country, I think it was 2011. I've read a couple of articles. I don't see it here, but I believe it was 2011, or maybe it's further down here in this story. 2019, he was granted, he was basically told he could be removed. He claimed that his life was at risk if he went back home to El Salvador. This is 2019. It's the first that anyone had ever heard of this. So they basically says he can't be removed to El Salvador, but he can be removed to other places. He's not legally here in the United States. I mean, it is so crazy to me to think that we give basically blanket excuses, not you and me, but the government, the media, the 7 pillars of propaganda, the left. They'll excuse people for being here for any reason whatsoever. And no matter what avenue that it exists to have the law enforced, they try to block it. They try to obfuscate our ability to to execute the law, to follow the law. And so, as the article points out here, Garcia still could have been deported to any other country that is willing to take him, and at no point was he granted legal residency. Predictably, CNN and MSNBC utterly failed to elucidate this distinction to their viewers. The term withholding of removal was only mentioned in 7 reports on MSNBC, 12 on CNN. But again, that's a vague and kind of a just confusing, ambiguous term. So the average CNN viewer doesn't know what withholding of removal. Anyway, so they have done their level best to make it sound like the Trump administration has just gone in, found a Hispanic in Maryland, made sure he was a father, and they said, get out of here, dude. You're going home with the gang members, right? That's what they want you to believe. And they've added to that. In fact, there's poll quotes here. Ari Melber, host of The Beat on April Fool's Day, this is not a joke, said this: they got the wrong guy. He was here legally. He was not, by the way, here legally. And he's being treated like this and sent down there, and now he's stuck. That's what Ari Melber said. Chris Hayes, good old Chris Hayes, all in, said he's a legal resident, referring to this individual. He is not a legal resident. He says he has a 2019 court order that prevented him from being sent back to his home country. That part is true, but he's not a legal resident. This is factually false. This is misinformation. Where are the fact checkers? I'm not really wanting the fact checkers, but this is how we're supposed to act and behave if we follow the guidance of the radical left. Alicia Mendez, MSNBC host of Prime, April 4th. Garcia, a protected legal resident who has been living in Maryland since 2011. False. He's not a protected legal resident. He is an illegal alien that had been issued an order of deportation, but he was granted basically a stay because he claimed that his life would be in jeopardy had he been deported to his home country, and they could have deported him anywhere that would have taken him. Now, here are the facts, and I don't want to stay into this too much longer. This is tied to what Trump is trying to do. This is one of the bits of ammunition that they try to use to stop the public opinion from getting behind what Trump's trying to do, to deport criminal, illegal aliens, in this case, with members of Tren de Aragua, using a law from 1798 that the Supreme Court has now said they're not going to stop him from doing that. So the facts of the case: this individual came to the United States illegally in 2011 from El Salvador. He's still a citizen of El Salvador. In 2019, during an immigration court hearing, a judge determined that he was, quote, a verified member of MS-13 based on information provided by a confidential informant. A board of appeals later upheld the first judge's determination, and he was issued a final order of removal. With all of his other options exhausted, he abruptly applied for asylum, claiming that he would be in mortal danger if he were to return to his home country. A second immigration judge denied that asylum claim and instead granted him a temporary withholding of removal to El Salvador specifically. So that's the full context. The media lies to us. The media does not give the full context. They want to conflate these things. They don't want you to know what Trump is actually doing. He is targeting the most dangerous people, those that have caused the most destruction and havoc, crime, terrorizing American citizens, rape, murder, assault, drugs, all of this stuff. They're trying to get these folks out of the country, and for some reason that defies all sense for those of us living in reality, we find the left and we find the media trying to excuse these people and defend these people when they are clearly and unequivocally in the wrong. I've got to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I am your host, the one and only Todd Huff, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of this, the first hour of the program. I'm going to go back to that clip I was trying to play at the very beginning before I realized that I had a setting incorrect on my device here in the studio. Going back to Stephen Miller, he's on with Sean Hannity. He's talking about this Supreme Court ruling that allows Trump to be able to use the 1798 law to deport these individuals, the Alien Enemies Act. It's now in full effect, as Stephen Miller tweeted out yesterday, I believe. And so this is what I was trying to play early on, but I was not able to do that because of a technical glitch that turned out to be the ever so rare user error. I'm kidding. I'm known to do this. Anyway, so here's Stephen Miller on Hannity framing this issue, framing this decision by the Supreme Court and how it validates what's happening. What Trump is doing to secure this country, to protect American citizens, and to enforce the law. Here it is, my friends.
This was a huge, a monumental victory for President Trump. The biggest legal win of this administration so far. A total embarrassment for crazy Judge Boasberg, who's been trying to force this president to bring foreign alien terrorists back onto American soil, trying to turn our planes around, trying to empty prisons in foreign countries and bring them back to our soil. This is a monumental, colossal victory for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for our founding generation, John Adams, who signed this law into effect in 1798, and for President Trump in fulfilling his mandate and campaign pledge. What does this mean for you and your family watching at home tonight? It means that the Department of Justice, FBI, DEA, ATF, the U.S. Marshal Service, Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement now have maximum authority to find and remove illegal alien gang members from Venezuela that have been responsible for so much misery in this country, for the torture and murder of Jocelyn Ungary, for the brutal slaying of Laken Riley. Those monsters can now be hunted down and expelled from this country with speed, force, and efficiency. This is a great day for America, Sean.
That's right. And that's the way to look at this, my friend. This is not a defeat for the Constitution or the rule of law. This was actually a victory for the rule of law. This was a victory for executive power. Listen, I don't want the president to have too much power. I'm a guy, listen, I don't want one president to have the authority to do something when I realize a guy down the road, guy or gal down the road, could then use the same power to do something the exact opposite. This is something that is under the purview of the President of the United States. These folks are here illegally. They are treacherous. They are wicked. They are vile. They are the worst of the worst. We have a judge who's trying to get them back here, claiming that they weren't, given due process and all this sort of thing. The reason this law exists is to get rid of the people who are truly at war with our society, with the way that we do things. People who are evil and hell-bent on doing evil, harming, murdering, torturing, raping other American citizens. People have lost their lives because of these evildoers. People have lost a lot. Sorry, there's a distraction here in the studio. People have lost their lives. People have been tortured. People have been harmed. People are no longer here that would be here if these barbarians, these absolutely evil people, were not allowed, or if they weren't in this country. There's no other way of looking at that, my friends. So that is good news for the American people. So getting to the end of what I want to say about that, I have just a minute or so here left this segment. So I mentioned off the top a lot of things happening. Of course, we know what's happening with the tariffs. We've got China now, who has instituted an 84% reciprocating tariff against the United States. They've also reportedly cut off rare earth mineral exports to the U.S. So there's a lot going on there. But there's also a lot of good news regarding this. There's up to potentially 70 countries who have reached out to the White House who want to negotiate with Trump on these tariffs. I've shared with you, you know this as well, you know this intuitively, that these these next several months or period of time are going to be difficult. There's going to be uncertainties. There's going to be ups and downs. The market will react. Other countries will react. But Trump and the United States of America hold a lot of the, well, we have the hand here. We are the ones, when we have these trade deficits with these other countries, that means that they are exporting a lot more of their stuff to us than they are importing stuff from us. So it's going to be a harder impact upon them. This is, the writing's on the wall here. You're not going to be able to survive this by going tit for tat with Donald Trump. He's not going to back down. We've played a clip of that yesterday. That's where I went ahead at least a little bit here at the beginning of the first hour, my friends, talking about that, some of the latest developments and so forth. But anyway, that's all the time that I have for this hour. I appreciate you listening to us so much. We have a second hour of the program. I hope you join us there. Be sure to follow us wherever you're watching or listening to the program, folks. Got to go, though. SDG.